The desert always remembered things better than people did. It held memories the way old hands held rosary beads. Slowly, gently, as if each grain of sand was a prayer whispered to the endless sky. And on a late summer evening, when the light melted into copper and gold, a lone rider wandered across that open stretch of wilderness. A man no taller in legend than a passing shadow, yet carrying in him the quiet weight of all the roads he'd traveled. His name was Elias Boone, but out there, names mattered less than the way a person treated the land under him. And Elias rode with the softness of someone who had learned not to take more than he needed. The wind brushed dust off his hat, curling it around him like an old friend tugging for attention. The sky stretched wide, weary but beautiful, a watercolor of dying daylight, the kind that makes a man sigh without realizing it. He tugged lightly on the reins of his paint horse, Cricket, a creature as loyal as she was tired. Her steps were slow, her breath short, her ribs showing the honest truth of long journeys and thin meals. The pair looked like they belonged to the landscape more than to the world of towns and men. Shapes worn down by time, figures carved by wind. Elias leaned forward, rubbing Cricket's sweat-damp neck, whispering the kind of words meant for animals, God, and nobody else. Soft, gentle, half apologies and half promises. The desert received it all without judgment. It was a strange thing, how land listened when people didn't. He was a man made of dust and regret, the sort the world didn't notice until he was gone. Elias Boone had never been important. He'd never owned enough land to mark his worth, never had a woman who wove his name into her dreams, never earned a place that called him home. But he'd learned to live kindly, quietly, like a man who respected every sunrise, even when it hurt to look at it. A long time ago, he thought he'd be someone, not famous, not rich, just someone seen, someone wanted, someone whose voice didn't get lost in a room. Life had other plans. It always did. Now he drifted through the West like a ghost in his own story, haunted not by tragedy, but by the softer heartbreak of never belonging anywhere. By late afternoon, he had crossed into a valley where the earth changed color. Deep red stones rose like sleeping giants. Cottonwoods lined an old, dry riverbed, their leaves trembling in the hush of the wind. Elias slowed Cricket to a stop. There was something sacred in the air here. He could taste it, like the faint sweetness of rain on dust. He didn't know it yet, but he had crossed into Apache land, a place where every pebble had a story, every shadow an ancestor, every breath a prayer spoken long before his boots touched the soil. The hair on his arms pricked up, not from fear, from reverence, as if the earth itself asked him to tread softer. He dismounted and knelt by the dry riverbed. The cracked earth looked thirsty. He brushed away a thin patch of soil, tried to see if there was moisture beneath. His fingers caught on something sharp, something metallic, a glint small as a tear, but bright enough to catch his breath. Elias brushed more dust away, slowly, carefully, the way a man tends to a wound. And beneath the tired skin of the riverbed, gold winked back at him, a piece no bigger than a walnut, but full enough to change a man's life. It sat there, half buried, half revealed, like a secret deciding whether it should be spoken aloud. Elias stared at it, his breath trembling in the low heat. He wasn't a greedy man. He wasn't even a lucky one. Luck had always passed him like a stranger looking the other way. But this felt like temptation wrapped in sunlight, the kind that tested what a man was made of. He lifted the gold gently. It felt warm, alive, as if the earth had been holding it for centuries. Elias closed his hand around it, and for a moment, just a moment, he wondered if this was his chance, to stop drifting, to stop being invisible, to carve out a simple life where nobody pushed him away. A man could buy land with gold this pure. A horse, a cabin, a reason to stay somewhere longer than a season. He held that dream for the length of one heartbeat, maybe two. Then the breeze shifted. A soft, low hum rose from the ground. Not loud, not violent, just aware. The kind of sound that made a man remember he wasn't alone, that he was trespassing on a story much older than his own. Elias looked at the gold again, then at the land, at the cliffs, standing guard like ancient watchers, at the cottonwoods, whispering warnings through trembling leaves. He knelt, opened his hand, and laid the nugget back where he found it. A slow breath escaped him, almost peaceful, as if he'd set something right in the world. He brushed dirt over the gold, smoothing it with his fingertips, like tucking a child into bed. "This land isn't mine," he murmured to the wind. "I got no claim here." The desert swallowed the words, but the valley listened. He climbed back on a cricket, his body aching, his spirit strangely lighter, as if doing the right thing gave a weary man a little extra strength. He rode on, unaware that he was being watched. High on the red ridge above him, half hidden by stone and shadow, stood a young Apache woman. Her name was Tala. She was no stranger to trespassers. She had seen men with cold eyes and hungry hands, men who carved the land open for gold and glory, men who treated sacred ground as if it were a poker table in a saloon. But this one, this dusty, worn cowboy, he had held gold in his hand and walked away. Tala narrowed her eyes, not in suspicion, in wonder. She watched the way the man rode, how he leaned forward as if comforting his tired horse, how he didn't press her land under his boots with arrogance, but with humility, with gratitude, as though the earth carried him rather than the other way around. She had expected another thief, another taker. Instead, she had witnessed something rare, a man choosing respect over wealth. Her fingers tightened around the bow she carried, but not out of threat, out of thought, out of curiosity. The elders always said, "You judge a stranger not by the words he carries, but by the weight of his choices." And the choice she had witnessed was one the land itself seemed to approve. Tala stepped back into the shadow of the cliff, silent as dusk, letting the cowboy ride on. But her eyes followed him, tracing his fading shape until he became no more than a drifting speck across the valley floor. A small smile tugged at her lips, fleeting, soft, the kind that arrives when the earth surprises you in a good way. She whispered something only the wind understood, a blessing, or perhaps a promise. And the land, ancient and patient, held that moment close, knowing it would matter long after footsteps faded and years passed like traveling clouds. For the cowboy had walked away from gold, but the land he honored, and the people who belonged to it, would never forget him. Not after this. Never after this. And somewhere far below, Elias Boone continued his quiet journey, unaware that his single act of decency had already begun weaving itself into a story larger than his own, a story that would not return to him for 13 long years. But when it did, it would return like thunder, soft at first, but impossible to ignore. Morning rose softly over the valley, the kind of slow, amber dawn that felt like a prayer whispered by the sky itself. And Elias Boone rode through it unaware that eyes followed him. Shadows watched him, and fate had begun stitching his path into someone else's story. Cricket limped slightly, the rough miles catching up to her bones. Elias noticed, rubbing her neck with a tenderness that didn't need words. "Easy, girl. We're nearly out of the stretch." But before they made it far, a hawk's sharp cry split the silence. Cricket stiffened. Elias instinctively reached for the worn grip of his revolver, though something in his gut urged him to move slow. From behind juniper bushes, 2 Apache scouts emerged, painted faces still as stone, bows drawn, the tips steady and unshaking. Elias froze. He knew better than to reach for metal in the face of warriors, especially on land that was never his to ride in the first place. The taller scout stepped forward, not speaking, but his gaze traveled over Elias, from the dust on his boots to the worn saddle, to the honest fear in his eyes. Elias swallowed, lifting his hand slightly, not surrendering, just showing he meant no harm. "I'm just passing through." His voice low, steady, like he didn't want to disturb the morning air. The second scout's gaze fell on Elias's tracks, then back to his face, as if searching for a lie. He found none. The 2 exchanged a look, some silent language older than any Elias knew. Then, unexpectedly, A figure stepped out from the ridge above. Tala. Dawn painted her in hues of gold and copper, softening her fierce posture, but not her strength. She walked toward the scouts, her expression unreadable. Her dark hair moved like river water in the breeze. Her bow loosely held, not in threat, but in readiness. The scouts turned to her with respect, waiting for her judgment. Tala studied the cowboy, the same man she'd seen bury gold the previous evening, the same man whose quiet reverence had anchored itself in her memory overnight. This one, she murmured to the scouts. He is not a taker. The scouts hesitated, but lowered their bows at her word. Tala nodded once toward Elias, not offering a smile, not offering hardness either, just a calm acceptance. Come. Her voice carried the weight of mountains. Not harsh, not inviting, but firm, as if the land itself had spoken through her. Elias exhaled slowly, still wary, still respectful, and allowed himself to be guided deeper into Apache land. Cricket limping beside him. He didn't ask questions. A wise man knows when silence is the safer language. The village lay tucked between tall red cliffs, like a heartbeat hidden in the ribs of the earth. Smoke curled gently from fires. Children darted around like desert sparrows. Women worked on hides. Men repaired bows, gathered water, sharpened knives. It was bustling, but not chaotic. The movement had rhythm, purpose, belonging. Elias felt painfully aware he possessed none of those things. The scouts brought him to the center of the village. People turned to look, some with suspicion, some with curiosity, some with a kind of tired sadness that came from seeing too many strangers bring harm. But when Tala stepped forward, the look softened, just slightly, just enough. The chief approached, a tall man with hair streaked by silver, eyes heavy with seasons, yet sharp as the point of an arrow. This is Elias Boone, Tala said. There was a weight in her tone, something that made the chief's gaze sharpen further. He crossed into our valley yesterday. Tala continued. I watched him uncover gold from the riverbed and return it to the earth. A ripple swept through the crowd, a soft murmur. People exchanged looks, not of fear, not of anger, but of astonishment, for the land had been suffering under the greed of outsiders, and witnessing one walk away from gold was no small thing. The chief regarded Elias with new eyes. Why did you leave it? He asked. The words weren't hostile, just raw and honest. Elias shrugged lightly, eyes on the ground. Didn't seem right to take what ain't mine. The chief stared a moment longer, then nodded once, slow and thoughtful. You will stay here until your horse is healed, he said, not as a threat, not as an offer, but as a simple truth. Elias opened his mouth to protest, but Tala cut him off with a calm glance. Your horse walks with pain. Her words softened like dusk. Let her rest. Elias closed his mouth, respecting her wisdom, and let himself be guided to the healer's tent. The healer was old man Cheno, a man with hands wrinkled like autumn leaves, and eyes that saw more than most wanted to reveal. He greeted Elias with a chuckle that sounded like a stream flowing over rocks. Even your bones sigh, cowboy. Sit. Let the dust settle. Elias couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at his lips. Cheno pressed herbs into Cricket's wound, mumbling soft prayers that made the air hum. While he worked, Nate, a boy no older than 10, snuck closer, eyes wide, heart wide open. Is your horse brave? The child asked quietly. Elias nodded. More than me. Most days. Nate grinned, a bright, honest thing, and plopped down beside him, not asking permission, just deciding that the cowboy was safe enough. Tala watched from a distance, arms folded, face unreadable, but there was no mistaking the softness in her gaze. When she saw Nate laugh, she cared for the boy deeply, like a sister, or perhaps something quieter, something sacred. Days passed in slow, steady rhythm. Elias helped mend structures, gather water, chop wood, not because anyone demanded it, but because doing nothing felt disrespectful. He learned the subtle etiquette of the village, and the village learned he wasn't a danger. Children grew bold enough to run past him, giggling. Adults nodded when he passed. Some even offered him food. warm bread, smoked meat, stew that smelled of sage and home. At night, he sat by the central fire, listening to Chino tell stories. Stories about spirits that guarded the cliffs. Stories of hunts long ago. Stories about the land, remembering acts of kindness. Even when no one else did, Elias absorbed each tale, feeling them settle into the hollow places of his heart. He didn't speak much, but he listened, truly listened, in a world where most men only pretended. Tala and Elias crossed paths often, but their moments remained quiet, gentle, weighted with unsaid thoughts. Sometimes she handed him water, their fingers brushing briefly, like a desert breeze slipping past skin. Sometimes they watched dawn together, not side by side, but near enough that their silences touched. Sometimes Elias felt her studying him, trying to understand the shape of the man who had left gold behind, wondering what stories were hidden under the dust of his life. She never asked. He never offered. But the understanding between them grew slowly, a seed watered by shared stillness. It wasn't romance, not the kind of quick-burning spark the world liked to tell stories about. It was respect, recognition, two souls tired of shouting at life, relieved to find someone who didn't require noise. Elias had known women who wanted loud promises, dramatic gestures, fire that burned hot and fast. Tala was not fire. She was stone warmed by the sun, mountain air, night wind. She did not consume. She endured, and she looked at him not as a man broken, but as a man humbled, softened, redeemed by the land he respected. And for the first time in years, Elias felt seen, not for what he lacked, but for what he chose. But peace is never a visitor who stays long in a world built on greed. One evening, a scout returned breathless, voice tight with warning. White men, near the border, looking for gold, carrying tools, maps, guns. The village stilled, the fire crackling loud in the tense silence. Some looked at Elias with suspicion, fear whispering through their eyes, fear born from too many broken trusts. Elias felt the shift, the weight of it settling heavy on his chest. "I ain't with them," he said softly, but he knew words alone couldn't ease generations of wounds. After a long pause, he stood, saddled Cricket, now able to walk without pain. He found Tala near the edge of the village, her posture rigid, her face hurting in that silent way strong people hurt. "You're leaving," she said, not accusing, just acknowledging. Elias nodded. "Don't want trouble following me here. Better I go before folks decide I'm part of the problem." Tala's eyes softened. "You were never the problem." Her voice held a truth the land itself seemed to echo. They stood in silence, the wind moving gently between them, like a messenger carrying thoughts neither dared speak aloud. At last, Tala stepped closer, hand brushing the horse's mane. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, "Thank you for leaving what wasn't yours." Elias swallowed hard, feeling something in him shift, a small healing, or maybe just understanding. He tipped his hat, not as a farewell, but as a promise, silent, unwritten. Then he rode away from the village, the cliffs watching, the land listening, Tala standing like a lone sentinel until he vanished beyond the horizon. She did not tell him that she had seen everything, that his act of goodness had already become a quiet story among her people. She simply watched him go, knowing the land would bring him back when the time was right, and when the world had carved its lessons into both their lives. 13 years would pass before their paths crossed again, but the valley, the gold, the choice, would wait for him, held in the patient hands of time. 13 years passed in the quiet, relentless way time prefers. Not loudly, not cruelly, just steady, like water wearing down stone. The world changed around Elias Boone. Towns sprang up like weeds. Railroads carved scars through untouched earth, and the soft places of the West shrank beneath the weight of men who wanted everything yet honored nothing. Elias changed too. He grew older the way forgotten trees do. Roots deep, branches tired, still standing, but leaning under winds that had their say for far too long. His hair silvered at the edges, not gracefully, but truthfully, The way a man weathers after too many seasons of sun and sorrow. He lived in small towns, in borrowed rooms, in beds that never remembered him. He worked ranches that weren't his, fences that would rot long after he moved on, cattle that stared at him with more understanding than most people ever offered. And each year the loneliness pressed deeper. Not dramatic, not devastating, just ever-present. A thin coldness draped around the ribs. Some men break loudly. Elias broke quietly. His ranch, the little patch of land he once dreamed of turning into a home, was long gone, lost to drought and debt and a bank that saw numbers instead of people. He didn't fight the loss, just packed his things in 2 small sacks and walked away as if he had never lived there. By then he had learned that people who never belong anywhere rarely get the luxury of staying. He rode with Cricket, though she was old now, her gait slower, her breaths heavier, yet she remained by his side, the one constant in a life that kept shifting like sand under a restless river. Sometimes, when night fell too hard and the stars looked too far away, Elias would lie with his hat over his eyes and feel the earth pulse beneath him. And in those moments, he would remember a riverbed on Apache land, a piece of gold gleaming like trapped sunlight, a woman with eyes steady as dusk. Tala, even after 13 years. Her name echoed in him like a soft drumbeat, a memory that refused to fade, not because of romance, but because she had been the first soul to look at him and see a man capable of goodness. He never spoke of her, never told a soul. Some stories are too sacred to hand to the wrong ears. One winter, thin and harsh, Elias found work repairing a telegraph station in a small trading town, the kind of place where news traveled faster than kindness. And one day, while Elias hammered warped boards back into place, a group of ranch hands lingered by the road, talking loud, laughing heavy. He ignored them at first, until their words drifted close enough to catch. Company men, one said, a whole mining outfit headed toward Apache land. Heard they found gold traces in the Red Valley. Another spat tobacco juice into the dust. Ain't gonna be pretty. Apache ain't the sort to hand over soil just 'cause men with papers want it. Elias froze, his hammer hanging midair. That valley, those cliffs, the old dry riverbed. He heard the third man grunt. If they don't give, the company'll just take. Always do. Elias lowered his hammer slowly, the nails in his pocket suddenly heavy as stones. The world around him blurred. The sky, the buildings, the noise. All he saw was Tala's face, not smiling, not speaking, just watching him the way she did. Steady, unmoving, trusting him in her quiet way. He swallowed hard, a roughness in his throat, like grief, like guilt. He couldn't ignore this. Not that valley, not those people, not the land that had once held him like a tired traveler who needed a place to breathe. He finished the repairs in silence, hands tight, breath uneven. Then he packed what little he had, saddled Cricket, and headed toward the red cliffs, toward the land that had never been his, but had once offered him a moment of belonging. The road was long, winter-bitten, and cruel in places, but Elias rode as if guided by something older than himself, some truth he had once honored, and needed to honor again. By the time he reached the valley, his bones ached, Cricket's hooves trembled, and his heart beat with a strange mixture of fear and purpose. The land welcomed him with a familiar silence, the kind that crawls under a man's ribs. It makes him feel both small and restored. He dismounted, touched the earth, and whispered, out of habit, out of reverence, out of longing, I'm back. He didn't expect anyone to hear, but someone did. From the shadows between the cottonwoods, a voice drifted out, steady as a river in spring. You returned. Elias looked up. Tala stood there. Older, yes, but stronger too. Her hair streaked subtly with age. Her posture tall, her presence commanding without raising a single word. Her eyes, darker than dusk, held him gently, recognition blooming slowly, like a rare flower remembering sunlight. Elias removed his hat, not out of politeness, but out of awe. Tala. His voice broke on her name, a fragile sound, like a branch bending before it snaps. She stepped closer, her gaze studying every changed line on his face, every scar life had carved into him. 13 winters have passed, she murmured. Her voice was warm, but shaded by the weight of everything that had changed. You look. Her eyes softened, wounded, but standing. Elias felt the words settle deep inside him, like warmth reaching a place long frozen. He nodded. You too. She exhaled gently, a release that sounded almost like relief, almost like sorrow. The tribe gathered behind her. Warriors, elders, children, faces marked by hardship, eyes carrying stories Elias couldn't yet read. He felt suddenly ashamed, not because he had left, but because the world had hurt them in his absence, hurt them in ways he wished he could have stopped. A young man stepped forward, broad-shouldered, eyes fierce. Who is he? Tala lifted a steady hand. One gesture, and silence fell. This is the man. She paused, her voice holding something sacred, who returned gold to the earth. A wave of murmurs rippled through the gathered people. Some looked at Elias with respect, some with disbelief, others with cautious hope. Elias shook his head, embarrassed. I only did what was right. Tala looked at him for a long moment, her gaze steady, soft, the way only truth can be. Most men do not. She whispered. They brought him to the council fire, sat him beside Tala, the flames dancing between them. Lighting memories, neither spoke aloud. Cheno appeared, older now, hands trembling slightly, but his smile remained. Warm, mischievous, alive. Ah, the wandering ghost returns. He chuckled. Time carved you, but didn't take you. Elias swallowed a knot of emotion. He looked around, at faces etched by hardship, at warriors ready for conflict, at children clinging to their mothers, fear threading the air like smoke. What's happening? He asked quietly. Tala answered, voice low, heavy. Company men, diggers, surveyors. They say our land is theirs now, because they found its value written on paper. Her jaw tightened. Paper has no memory. Her eyes flicked to Elias. Land does. Elias felt something inside him ignite. A slow-burning fire. Not anger. Purpose. What can I do? The elder council looked at him, measuring, weighing, deciding. Tala spoke softly. You cared for the land when no one watched. For 13 years we remembered that. And now, she paused, her gaze steady. We trust you to stand with us. Elias inhaled deeply, the weight of her words settling like a warm hand on his chest. He nodded, slow, but certain. Then I will. Simple words, but spoken with a depth that echoed across the valley. The kind of echo that feels like destiny answering itself. As the fire crackled, as the moon rose, as shadows danced across the cliffs like ancient spirits stirring, Tala leaned slightly toward him, her voice a whisper meant only for the man beside her. There is something you need to see, something we have kept safe, something that belongs to a promise made long ago. Elias frowned. What promise? Tala looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Gentle, mysterious, knowing. The land remembers, she said, and so do we. And with those quiet words, Section 3 ends, and the world readies itself for the repayment. The climax, the turning of fate that has been simmering for 13 silent years. The desert dusk came on gentle feet that evening, as if it didn't want to startle the earth, as if it knew something sacred was about to settle into place. Light spilled across the mesas in a thin golden wash, a kind of fading miracle, and Tom Braden stood at the edge of Apache land, hat held in both hands, heart beating like a slow drum you feel more than hear. 13 years had carved him quieter, the way time softens a river's roar into a thoughtful whisper. Age had made him less certain of the world, and more aware of the small truths that make a man. And this was the place where his truth had once changed course. He expected tension, maybe suspicion, but the tribe welcomed him with a silence that felt warm, like a blanket laid gently across weary shoulders. From the deep cedar shadows, A man approached, tall, steady, carrying the calm of a mountain lake on a windless morning. It was Neshoba, once a boy with sand, soft eyes, now a leader whose footsteps seemed guided by something older than time. He did not speak. He simply offered Tom a nod, a small one, but full of meaning. Beside him stood Nia, the same Nia from all those years ago, braid darker now, but streaked with silver threads that caught the sunset like trapped starlight. She looked at Tom with a slow, deliberate breath, not with longing, not with anger, but with the tenderness of someone who had already forgiven long before forgiveness was spoken aloud. Her smile came soft, thin, peaceful, as if seeing him filled a space she didn't realize had been empty. Tom's chest warmed with a feeling he couldn't name. Not love, but closure, a gentle stitching of something that once tore. They guided him to the fire circle, the same one where he had once stood trembling, sand clinging to his boots, the heat of judgment thick in the air. Tonight the flames moved differently, slow, almost wise, as if they remembered what happened here 13 years ago, and approved of what was happening now. Elder Koa stood, his voice a warm gravel, shaped by years of story and wind. Tom Braden, you gave back what was never yours. You acted with honor when no eyes were on you. Our children lived through hunger because of your choice. Our songs lived another winter. Our spirits another season. Tom swallowed, his breath catching, his throat thick. Neshoba stepped forward holding a bundle wrapped in woven cloth. Patterns of river and sunrise. Stories told in thread. When he unfolded it, Tom saw a necklace of Apache gold, hammered into the shape of a rising sun. The very gold he once found. The gold he refused to take. Neshoba held it with reverence. You returned the earth to us. Tonight, we return it to you in the shape of gratitude. Tom shook his head, voice trembling. I can't accept. Nia's hand rose gently. Let kindness return home. All good things circle back. He felt the medallion touch his palm, warm as if it carried the memory of hands that shaped it, and something inside him fell in a place like a final puzzle piece. But the night held more, something larger, something he didn't expect. Elder Koa motioned toward the people. A young woman stepped forward, dark hair braided, a small child tucked behind her skirts, eyes bright, curious, soft as morning earth. This is Sammy, Koa said. Her father died in the cold moon. Her mother tends the land alone. The tribe has chosen to give her the land where your gold once slept. That land will be hers, her future, her safety, protected in your name, and ours. Tom's breath hitched. The child peeked up at him, eyes round as river stones, and his heart cracked in a place he hadn't realized was still fragile. Why me? He whispered into the wind. Because, Neshoba replied in a voice that carried the weight of truth. You did right simply because it was right, not for glory, not for reward. Such a man deserves to stand in the history of this land. The fire popped softly, sending sparks into the deepening night. Sparks like tiny prayers drifting upward. Nia led Tom a little away from the circle, toward the ridge, where the sky hung low and heavy with stars waiting to be born. I always knew you'd return, she said, her voice the same soft music he remembered. Not for me, but for the part of your soul that wasn't done with this place. Tom lowered his head, shame mixing with relief. I wasn't proud of the man I was back then. We all shed versions of ourselves. Nia murmured, what matters is who we have the courage to become. She touched the medallion, just once, a gentle brush like a closing chapter. We remember you well, Tom Braden, as the man who walked away from fortune, to honor something deeper. Her smile closed a wound he didn't know he still carried. Neshoba returned then, motioning him to follow. They walked to the old digging site, now covered in wildflowers shaped like small morning suns. The earth healed, the land forgiving. Neshoba knelt, drew a circle in the soil with his finger. A blessing, a seal. 13 years ago, you left something behind here, he said. Tom frowned. I've already received too much. Not gold, Neshoba whispered. Truth. He placed a small leather pouch in Tom's hands. Inside were 13 stones, each carved with a single Apache word: hope, honor, patience, forgiveness, strength, balance, and more. One stone for each year the tribe remembered him. One stone for each year he carried the burden of his choice. Tom's eyes filled, one tear slipping free, falling into the dust, joining the land that once held his secret. The wind rose softly, lifting grains of dirt, lifting the scent of juniper and distant rain, lifting a weight off Tom's shoulders that had been there for so long he forgot what it felt like to stand without it. Your path is clean now, Neshoba said. Walk without looking back. Tom felt those words settle in him, not as instruction, but as freedom. Finally, freedom. He turned toward the horses, toward the long road home, toward a future unwritten but waiting patiently. Before he mounted, he glanced back and saw Nia standing at the ridge, her figure framed by dying sunlight, Neshoba beside her, the tribe behind them, the land holding them all like a mother who forgives every scar. Tom touched the medallion, felt its warmth pulse softly against his chest. Then he rode into the settling night, lighter, cleaner, whole. And you listening now, with your own memories, your own regrets, your own quiet acts of goodness. Know this: kindness is never lost. Honor echoes. The world remembers gentle choices long after the noise has faded. If this story touched you, let your heart tap the like. Share your thoughts below, and follow for more slow, spoken tales whispered like firelight. And tell me, friend, from what corner of this wide world are you watching tonight?